I'm so excited for our next guest to join us on stage to close out. She has been heavily involved in Zip's mission from the early days before we even started coding the product, and has really guided us on a lot of what the future has ahead of us around UX, AI, and all sorts of things. Dr. Elouise Epstein is often regarded as a futurist in our space, an innovator. She's a partner at Kearney, and I couldn't be more excited to welcome Elouise and Rujul back onto the stage.
So Elouise, thanks so much for joining me for this fireside chat. Excited to have you.
It's my pleasure. I'm very excited.
So Elouise is a partner at Kearney and is a published author. She actually has a new book coming out very soon.
Yep. In the process of being released right now.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think Elouise is absolutely the foremost thought leader in the space of procurement. So I'm really, really looking forward to this discussion.
Well, thank you.
And maybe to just start, we've had a lot of conversation, obviously, today about intake. And I remember when we first met maybe 2 or 3 years ago, not many people were talking about intake, I think, and that's certainly changed recently. And I'm curious why you think that is, and why it's such a relevant topic today.
Yeah, so let me take the audience back to the spring of 2021. We were just getting our vaccines and sort of not quite back to seeing people in person. And I met Felix and then Rujul in the Zoom world. And earlier in 2020, and I was getting ready for the release of my Trade Wars book. And I had talked about, and those familiar with my spider map, I had been talking about what all the pieces of it were, and there was a box in the spider map called UX, user experience, and nobody was doing it. And the first time I saw what you had developed, I'm like, that's it, you did it. Like you filled the box, and I put you right in the box right away because you had done it. And I think I was talking about some future. I was predicting a future that would come. And it wasn't even 6 months, and you had delivered on that. So I think you built the thing that procurement didn't know we needed.
No, I mean, I remember our conversation, and it like clicked when we spoke. And when you think about user experience, like, why has that been the missing piece? Like, why does that matter so much today?
Well, okay, so. Partially because we've been sold procurement's been sold a line of nonsense. I'm trying to censor myself here. And almost fraud, but it's not quite fraud, not quite the level of fraud. But this idea that you would buy a singular source to pay suite and have everything, that was for a decade, maybe 15 years, that was the thing. We are going to buy one thing and we're all good. And I believe that too, until I didn't. And I realized the evidence was pointing that that doesn't work. And so with all of the emergence of ProcureTech startups in 2017, we had this huge just curve. It's still going, by the way. But I think what happened is everybody was looking at other pieces of source to contract and category management and whatnot, and people had forgotten about intake. Mm-hmm. Which is ironic because, as I think we'll talk about in a minute, to me, intake's the ballgame. It's everything, or intake broadly speaking. And so it was kind of funny. Even I had this concept of user experience, but even I missed it because we were reacting to big source to pay, and you can fill in the blank of big source to pay. We were reacting against it, so that's why I think it got missed.
And when you think about, the value of solving for intake, what's the tangible value? Like, I know, in some of the other panels earlier today, cycle times, of course, spend under management, negotiated savings have all been discussed. Like, how would you sort of how do you think about it?
I think it's all of those things, but I'm going to take the question in a slightly different direction. So in my new book, I talk about algorithmic literacy. And I argue that our lives are driven by algorithms. whether it's Google Maps or Facebook or Amazon or whatever, even the bus schedules or the train schedules, there are algorithms, this invisible hand driving our behavior, and sometimes more than we'd like. I've become absolutely addicted to TikTok, and for more, well, anyway, that's a different story. But it's that algorithm is so dialed in, and so to connect it, if I'm going to log into a procurement system, my argument has been we need that algorithmic hand that guides us to the outcome, to get the spend under management, to get the savings, to ensure we don't duplicate suppliers, to limit the suppliers. Because I actually would argue that users will do the right things if you show them the right information. And absent that, we could just manipulate them into doing it. Amazon manipulates me into buying things I didn't know I wanted. And TikTok keeps me glued to the screen at 2 o'clock in the morning because I want to go to bed, but I can't stop swiping. And I think, to me, this is why it's so important. If I go to that one screen and everything's there, and the intelligence is keeping me there, I don't care about anything else. Because let's be honest, nobody cares about procurement. The business doesn't care about procurement. In fact, procurement done well is invisible to the business user. And when you think about pharma companies or banks or engineering companies, or any company really, all the tech companies, you have really, really, really smart people developing products, supporting products, et cetera, and then we treat them like pseudo criminals. Don't spend money. like that's not going to get, no wonder people hate procurement, because we draw ourselves into a box full of procurement jargon that nobody cares about. And so, I think that was a long-winded answer, but I think we can embed procurement through algorithmic means and get all of those benefits without the user ever being none the wiser.
No, it's the notion of guiding them and following the path without the burden of knowledge.
Yeah.
Algorithmic literacy is actually a great segue to ask you about generative AI. And I'm actually, we've had a lot of conversation on this topic earlier so far today. At a high level, I would just love to learn, hear your perspective on what do you think the future of procurement is when you look at all the change that's occurred in the world last year?
Yeah, so I want to qualify this. So I work in consulting, and consultants are always first out to give their opinion with the least amount of foundational information. And so I'm not popular with my colleagues. So my moniker is, if you're over 30, I don't care what you have to say about Gen AI. And that includes me. So I'm going to say, I actually don't know the answer. And I would be peddling half-baked theories, because we have to actually ask more fundamental questions, like questions of, does Google still exist in 10 years, 5 years? How we interact, even cell phones today, we take that as a sacrosanct thing, but maybe cell phone devices changes in ways we can't imagine. And because I'm a little older, I grew up in a pre-internet age. And so, when I graduated high school, you would have never imagined, anything interconnected. So that's my qualifier. What I would say, though, is it develops the ability for the system to understand what we're asking, and I think that's where Gen AI and LLMs are really good at understanding what we're typing and keeping the context alive of, hey, I want to do this, give me this information, and then the next prompt takes that information and contextualizes it and keeps it going so it's not a one-up. Most chatbots are pre-LLMs were terrible, because we pre-code, all right, you have these 5 choices, and if it's not one of these 5 choices, the chatbot just stops working. Or if you give it random input, it just doesn't understand. But LLMs change that. And so now if you have an intake form that is intelligent and based with this, then I think it changes the game fundamentally. I don't care about anything else. I think if you embed, which you all are, Gen AI right at that intake moment, again, I think that's the ballgame.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, a thought-provoking question, and I was actually genuinely curious, like, where do you think intake is headed 10 years from now? But in asking that, I realized you may have just answered it in some ways.
Right, but I will give you I'm bullish on, I call it process orchestration, but it doesn't really matter because it's really this singular interface. Because look, one of the things I've been so impressed with you all with Zip is that you go pull data from all these other systems. So I don't have to go into other systems. Well, play that out. Like in other words, your source to pay that you spent 10, 20, $30 million, you'll still have it, but increasingly we'll just put it into a box and put it into the closet. And oh, by the way, most of those logos on my spider map, they're gonna get put into a box and into the closet too, because the intake form is gonna just go pull the data it needs, and the user doesn't care. The user's not gonna log in. And so my argument, and this is why I'm so bullish on process orchestration and applying Gen AI there, is because all of this stuff, you may still have these as micro engines in the closet, but if nobody's accessing those systems directly, then you're not gonna be paying as much as you were for those systems, which means the value is going to be right here. And when you added the payment module, that was like another light bulb moment for me, is like, oh my God, like like I don't need a P2P system anymore. Think about that. Like anybody in Fortune 500, like it's just put in P2P and like that'll solve everything. It solves nothing, oh, it doesn't solve nothing, but almost nothing other than creating a lot of busy work for IT and so on and so forth. And by embedding that lightweight in your tool, you've completely redefined procurement. Like today's procurement, I don't even care about the future. Like your short-term roadmap is like, it is so disruptive. And I think the mid-tier companies have figured that out. And I think the enterprises, which are where I spend a lot of my time, are starting to figure that out. And they're starting to look at the mid-tier and say, hey, I wonder. And that's the start of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I forgot the question, but
it was a great answer. That's actually a great segue because I think we have both the mid-market and enterprises represented, in the audience today. And I think one of the things that we see is from a lot of the mid-market companies, all the cross-functional teams, legal, IT, security, like over time, they actually want to come into just one system that's already there, AKA Zip, and just kind of start to work there more and more. But a lot of the enterprises have very, sort of long-standing systems in some of these other, with some of these other functions, and so it's sort of more of the orchestration narrative. Like, where do you see each of these segments heading? Like, do you think there's does it converge? Does it diverge over the next 5 years?
I think, well, first of all, so I have a lot of villains in my writing. So CIOs are now in my crosshairs, so I'm taking them to task. So when you get to that portion of my new book, you'll understand, you'll laugh. But ERPs, and like never has so much money been spent for so little value. And because ERPs were designed in the 1990s, and they are not solving today's problem much, like they're solving yesterday's problems barely, not even today's and certainly not tomorrow's. So we are migrating and spending billions and billions of dollars to upgrade to the latest. I'm trying not to throw particular companies under the bus, but to billions of dollars to upgrade, and to what end? When in reality, you've proven actually that we just need the lightweight stuff, or we need to just grab the data from it. And that's gonna change the IT landscape. And increasingly, this converged user experience, I mean, you're doing it. That's what IT is like, going around like, it's like some new novel idea, but but you're doing it. And you're doing it in a very clever, lightweight way, now embedded with Gen AI. And I think that's really gonna change the game. Now the reason I pick on CIOs, first of all, they're not my people, but second of all, they're stuck in the past. They want big monolithic systems. And I think the takeaway from today should be, you can do it with a lightweight system. This is the power of intelligent systems, of lightweight process orchestration systems.
Yeah, I mean, to that end, like, when you speak with your clients, you're advising them, like, a lot of the times these types of changes can seem very monumental and hard, right, to kick off and to implement. Like what's your advice in terms of just sort of starting out?
Well, I used to be nicer about it. Now I'm very pokey. I will challenge them because I will challenge any client because I'm not having it. I have the receipts. I go back to failed business cases for source-to-pay systems. That's kind of like one of my hobbies. I have a lot of weird hobbies. and looking, and by the way, Carney is guilty of this, as every systems integrator is, of, this great benefits here, there, but when you look at them a couple years down the road, it's like, what idiot thought of that? Like, that was never gonna work. And so we have to really, if you're procurement, you have to take advantage of your own destiny, and you cannot rely on the CIO. Increasingly, we don't need IT to fire up a Salesforce account or any HubSpot account. Like, we can just do it, point, click, credit card, done. Like, in this era, why do I need the CIO advising me? And more importantly, if the CIO says, well, we're an SAP, an Oracle shop, or whatever shop, no, that's not right. That's them trying to get job preservation. And if you're a CPO, Chief Supply Chain Officer, you have to take control of your destiny. And so now I'm much more aggressive in saying, no, that's not acceptable, because you're just going to walk off the cliff like everybody before you. And to be fair, I work with the 1% that is really pushing the boundaries. So a British Telecom, a J&J, Vodafone, and those are all publicly known. So, and so we have a new generation of leaders that are not stuck in the past, and I think that's really important to call out.
No, I mean, I think something that I think you'd articulated to me in the past, which I think Tyler from Figma had shared in the previous panel, is that, if you solve for the front end and you actually get people to use the system, you can actually realize all of the ROI that you've been promised from all of the downstream systems, if only people were to actually get use from them.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've got about 10 minutes to open up Q&A to the audience. So I think we've again got some mics going around, and so please wait till the mic comes to you.
I will riff and tell stories if you don't have questions. So you're duly warned.
Hello, I'm Devin at Guild. You mentioned not, asking people over the age of 30 about AI. So how do you kind of spark the curiosity for those who may not be as tech savvy or may not like the change into this new procurement system? How do you spark curiosity and adoption?
Yeah, so I'll try to answer that three ways. I think, so the fear, there's a fear there, and everybody's fearful. And of course that fear is exacerbated by folks that say, we're gonna lay off 90% of the workforce and be all automated. I don't buy that. I actually think, I like to say that there's a bus, everybody gets a bus ticket. And the bus is going to the future. And now people will opt not to get on the bus, and that's okay, but that doesn't mean that the bus is not going. And some people get on the bus, and halfway through they'll get motion sickness and they'll get off the bus. That's okay. But the bus is going to the future whether you want to or not. And so I like to give the tickets to everybody, and people are really fixated on this because you find a lot of middle managers that don't want to get on the bus, and so they start poking the tires, and they try to lay in front of the bus and do other things. So, and then the other piece of that is, ideally, people would be motivated. So when we talk about all this data nonsense about doing analytics and intelligence and blah, 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 the people that are curious will succeed. And I write about this. I'm terrible at math. How can I do analytics? That's the title of one of my subheadings. I barely made it through high school geometry. And yet I love analytics. I love data. So how do we reconcile that? And it's because I just keep going, and I don't necessarily need to know the underlying math. I just need to figure out how to solve the problem I want to understand about the data. So again, anybody can get on that bus. And then the third aspect of that is, like, we can't go 5 minutes without somebody bringing up Gen AI in the world. And I think we've hit this tipping point where it's in the schools. So anybody with kids has to deal with it in school. Anybody with that creates music or art has to be aware of this because there's copyright issues, et cetera, on and on and on. So as it changes, like, all of us have to contend with it in our personal lives. And once that happens, which it has happened, then you have no choice. Just like with phones, like smartphones, you almost can't do many things unless you have a smartphone. So.
I love the bus analogy.
Yeah. I've had workshops that just stop while people start debating about who's going to get on the bus and who's not going to get on the bus. So, and it's also very kind because it says we care about everybody, but we also are realistic in that I don't care what you do, that bus is going and it's going to leave at 9 a.m. sharp. So, whether you're in front of it or not, it's going to its destination. Oh, we got one over there. Oh, yeah.
Me again. Question, how has your thinking since writing Trade Wars evolved? There, in the book you outline that the foundation of future digital procurement is based on P2P, data lake, plus, I think it's BenCube, if I recall that correctly. Zip is none of these. So how has your thinking evolved? Because you're obviously very much in favor of kind of the UX solution that Zip brings, but they are not a data lake or any of the other pieces.
Yeah, so my thesis still from Trade Wars still plays out. I'll come back to the intelligence bit, but the UX piece where I talked about, and I had two mock-ups of requisitions. One was a requisitioner, a chatbot thing. That was like the first thing I showed these guys because it was like when they were describing the thing, I'm like, no, I got to show you. I just created this and this was in my own mind, in the middle of pandemic chaos. I'm drawing this out on a not even a whiteboard, just a piece of paper. Of hey, I need a laptop, and then the source spot says, well, what kind would you like? Apple or Lenovo? Most users select Apple or Lenovo, and well, which models do we have? And this whole interaction, that didn't exist when I wrote Trade Wars. So that was why I was so excited when these guys called. I'm like I got to show you this. So that has what has changed in my thinking is it's become clear to me that that's 90% of the game, or 80% or 70%, but it's a large portion. Like if you read Trade Wars, it was like, oh, we're all equal. Like they're not all equal because, by the way, the app store that I talked about, Gen AI is going to obliterate the app stores because it has all of these integrations. So that part of the spider map is going to go away, and so whoever's doing Gen AI in the intake or the UX is going to get a bigger portion. And by the way, data management, the data foundation, that's going to just kind of go away. Where I do think Gen AI is going to make a big difference is with intelligence. And so I think the data lake and that part, we have to think about how we transact with procurement. And I have that architecture map. My new architecture map has a whole other bit about intelligence. And I think a lot of that's going to be more bespoke. I don't think you're going to have a lot more solutions. And so this gets to capability uplift and sort of this question about, like when I say I suck at math, how do I do analytics? I think Gen AI is going to be there where it will tell me more about my data than I actually knew. And so my thinking has evolved slightly, but it's just gotten more refined. And I think the biggest change is the proportions of that stuff in the middle.
We've got time for one final question.
Thank you, Doctor. The topics that you did mention, I think there are some, Gen AI is making some big professions obsolete.
Yes.
What do you think will stay in procurement? With Gen AI, of course, there might be some things that might become, but what will stay?
Okay, so buckle up. I think this will be a long answer, so sorry. So you got a demo earlier of a sort of a contract, CLM light. I mean, it's not even CLM. I think legal is going to get obliterated. Like, there's no doubt. And lawyers see this too. This is not me prognosticating. Like you're seeing law firms really struggling with this because Gen AI is really good at legal. And I think where you're going to find is so they've added the most core pieces of contracting. Just like, yeah, no problem. Like it's so easy. And so when I look at what's happening in CLM, I make a note now that I'm not even looking at that market anymore because I think CLM is the wrong tool. We've moved beyond the CLM. And so I think procurement takes an even greater role because you can easily kick the CLM. Like, you should not be implementing CLM systems. Like, stop. And then there's the other part, and where I think this gets to, and when you have this one interface that's doing both intelligence and all the benefits of spend compliance and et cetera, what you realize in the bigger context, which is what my new book is when you look at a supply chain, whether it's manufacturing or a financial institution, however you want to define supply chain, most supply chains are made up of third parties. Who manages third parties? It's not the CIO, it's not the CFO, it's the CPO or Chief Supply Chain Officer. And so, like, my whole new book is really elevating procurement to say, guess what? We need to be looking at the end-to-end supply chain because that's where the risk is, that's where the ESG is, that's where the innovation is. Because almost all supply chains are third parties. And so really where this goes, I'm bullish about where procurement can go if we evolve to do less of the put in CLM to put contracts in a database, but actually pull the insights out in an intelligent way where we're not even fooling around with the documents. I don't care where the documents sit. Anyway, that was the shortest I can make that answer.
Elouise, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So to close out, we first just wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to Maggie, Kathy, Nick, Felix, Riley, all of the Zip team, our partner at ThinkStream, and the full One Sansom team for making this event happen. So please give them a round of applause. And we just wanted to say sincerely, just a big thank you to every single person here. We know how hard it is to take time away, a full day away from the middle of the week. And so it means so much to us. And thank you for allowing us to be a very small part of each of your journeys.
Yeah, thank you everyone. And as Rajul said at the beginning, we truly believe that the people in this room will play one of the most impactful, if not the most impactful role to the business in the next 10 years. And we really wanted to thank you, everyone here, for letting us be part of your journey, letting us be part of your solution. We wouldn't be here without you. Thank you.